Parshat Yitro takes its name from Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law. At the beginning of the parsha, he hears what God has done for Israel, and he comes with Moshe's family after the Exodus, and the family is reunited. And Yitro then goes on to provide advice to Moshe, and that's the first section of this Shabbat's Torah portion. Yishma Yitro Chahed Midian Choten Moshe Et Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe LiYisrael Amo. Yitro heard, the Kohen of Midian, he heard, and the father of Moshe, he heard all that God had done to Moshe and to Israel, his people. For God, Hashem, has taken Israel out of Egypt. See Hashem et Yisrael Mitzrayim. There's a question really two questions. One is, when does this whole episode happen? And the other question is, what precisely did Yitro hear? The shot seems to be he heard about the Exodus, and then he came to be reunited with the family. There are some. There's some textual evidence against that position. Most notably, the Torah portion continues that the next day Yitro goes out and he sees Moshe adjudicating, and he's overwhelmed by all the people coming with questions, which suggests that this happens after the Torah was given. Right? That's why everyone has all these new rules and mitzvot, they're lining up around the block to ask Moshe questions. So maybe Yitro's visit comes later, comes after the Torah was given, and that's how some of the commentaries take it. In which case, Vayishma Yitro. So the timing of this episode then needs to be precisely defined. And then also what precisely he heard. Okay, it sounds like he heard all that God did, right? But what is that exactly? Does that mean? Rashi quotes two opinions from the Midrash. So what did he hear? Mashmua Shama. They caused him to come. Kriyat Yamsuf or Milchemet Amalek. Okay, did he hear about the splitting of the sea, or did he hear about the war against Amalek? The war against Amalek is the immediately prior episode in the Torah, and so that makes sense. The splitting of the sea is this most dramatic event, and so it makes sense that news of that would have reached Midian, and Yitro would have heard. I think, though, just more broadly or more abstractly, when we just think about what is it that draws somebody who isn't Jewish, who's actually like a Kohen Midian, he has like a professional interest in a different religion, and what's going to cause him to like there's something really special that's going on between God and the Jewish people, and I want to check this out. I want to see what's going on. It makes me curious. It makes me want to, at least for a time, join up with these people. So what is it? So Kriyat Yamsuf is one paradigm, this incredible, miraculous, positive, triumphant intervention. The other is this attack, unprovoked attack against us by Amalek, and that's also an interesting dynamic. There's a very real one. I think that there's a something about anti-Semitism is irrational, and it was always irrational. And I think if you attract the enmity of bad people, you might be doing something right. Okay, if all the worst people in history have been obsessed with Jews and have seen Jews as an obstacle to their evil plans, then maybe being Jewish is something kind of special. Not be Jewish despite the anti-Semites, which is a dead end. No one's going to be Jewish, despite the anti-Semites. But to recognize that the focus that really bad people have in opposing Judaism is a testament as well to this relationship we have with God, and that evil people understand that the way to combat the goodness that we bring into the world, they're going to have to deal with their Jewish problem. Maybe that's what Yitro recognized. It's a very contemporary dynamic, and you find echoes of that throughout history. Ibn Ezra takes us in a different direction and says that for sure Yitro came later on. He came after the Torah was already given. He has textual evidence for why that is. The Torah puts the story out of order to juxtapose and to contrast Amalek as this pinnacle of Gentile enmity and hatred and opposition to our mission as Jews, and Yitro as showing us that no, actually there are some people who aren't Jewish who can support us and protect us and praise us, and that's also true in the Torah. Put the story out of order to remind us that both of those dynamics exist, and both of those those two sides of that spectrum exist in the world, and we have to remember we have to defend ourselves and combat Amalek, and we have to be open to receiving the solidarity of someone like Yitro. Rabbi Browdy, who was the rabbi of Rosh Shalom about 100 years ago, when speaking of about this Torah portion, added an extra layer and pointed out, remind us that Amalek is the descendant of Timnah, who was, according to some Midrashic traditions, she was a rejected convert who ended up marrying Esav and being the grandmother of Amalek. And our mistaken closing of the doors in the face of good people, sincere people who want to learn more about Judaism and have some affiliation with the Jewish community, ends up, down the line, sometimes generations later, giving rise to our own worst enemies. And so the embrace of Yitro as a non-Jewish ally is an appropriate, right after our combat with Amalek, is a very appropriate sort of tying of that loose end, or sort of bring balance to that spectrum again, that we have to be open to allies who are good, and welcome people into our communities who are sincere and searching, and that's also part of keeping us safe against enemies like Amalek. I don't think I have to connect the dots to some contemporary resonances, but and the Torah is always has resonance for contemporary issues. But I think all of these messages seem very, very true to me. Right, to defend ourselves against hostility and against enemies, we have to be open to those who are sincerely searching and interested in what we have to offer them, and recognizing that there is hostility out in the world, outside the walls of our community, but there's also allyship, and that we should combat the hostility, but embrace those allies and stand with them. And some people are drawn to our community, not as a statement against anti-Semitism. Again, I really just don't think that's not sustainable. That can't be. Spiting the anti-Semites is not a that's not a long-term recipe for Jewish continuity and Jewish survival. But I do think that we can take pride that many of the worst people in history and some of the worst causes in history have been associated with Jew hatred, because when we're doing our job right, we're representing the morality in the world and representing the godly ideal in the world, and that is a barrier to all the worst people. Have a wonderful Shabbat. Hope to see you or hear from you in the coming days.